Michael, let's start with you. Introduce yourself and say why you're running.
Yeah. So I am the third generation owner of our family business here in Central Oregon. We've been around forever. We just celebrated 70 years in business. I'm the father of 4 daughters and an amazing wife of 20 years. And I'm also the chair of the Redmond School Board. Also, for fun, in my other job, I'm a drummer for Precious Bird. So get out and about, trying to share the love and bring the joy. So I got involved in politics during COVID, actually. It was really messy nationally, and it was starting to bleed in locally. And so I'm a bridge builder and a consensus maker, and I have really good friends on both sides. And I thought, man, somebody should do something about this. And I went, oh no, I think that might be me. So I jumped in, and I'm so proud of the work that we were able to do. I have a politically diverse school board that I respect and love tremendously, and I feel like we've been able to balance each other out and kind of keep some of the fringe things on the fringe. And so we've been able to kind of refocus education around the main thing, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I think it's a good model that could be replicated at the state level.
Great. Anthony?
Yeah, my name's Anthony Broadman. I'm serving on the Bend City Council, where I've served for the last 3.5 years. My day job is I'm an attorney for federally recognized Indian tribes, and I'm the chief judge of the Warm Springs Court of Appeals, where I've served for the last few years. I have 3 daughters, and I'm married to Dr. Kate Broadman, who's a physician at St. Charles. She's a pediatrician. Our family's very focused on child care and health care for kids and making sure that kids in Central Oregon have a great start, whether it's Kate working at the hospital, delivering, or right there after babies are delivered. You know, Bend has been an incredible place for me to start a business. Started my law firm and have served federally recognized tribes from Bend and in Oregon and throughout the West for the last 15 years. And it's taught me a lot about government, which is you know, to serve your community the way that you would want to serve your family. I don't ask my cousins and nieces and nephews, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, if I have to step up and help them. And I really think that's the way that I've tried to serve on city council as a practical, pragmatic policymaker. The decisions that we make in public service are serious, and they have real life consequences, and they're too important to distract ourselves with culture wars and partisanship. And Central Oregon is we're such a fortunate place that we have the ability to work together. And we've worked together in such incredible ways over the last several years. I serve on the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project, which is an amazing collaborative where we work together to meet the crisis of wildfire on our front door. We have the loggers in the room, the environmentalists, the recreational users, and we all come together to solve one of our biggest problems. That's the model that I think really works in Central Oregon. It's something that the rest of the state can use to solve some of our biggest challenges.
Great, thank you.
We'll just start going around, so I guess Jennifer, you can take the next one.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I guess we started with you, so I'll start with you this
Sure.
time. Okay. What are the biggest issues for you this year? And then how would you tackle those in your position in the legislature?
Yeah, I think for Central Oregon and for our entire state, housing and affordable housing for middle-income families is our biggest challenge, making sure that people can live in the communities where we work. We have a ton more work to do, but I'm really proud of the progress that this community has made. Last year, the city of Bend built more homes for working families than any other city in the state per capita, and any other city besides Portland total, which this community should be so proud of that. We do that by championing the kinds of developments that I worked on that really started me in looking at serving in the legislature. Co-championing and advocating for House Bill 3318, which is the first teacher priority housing development of its kind. We're going to need these creative types of initiatives in the legislature in order to meet our challenges when it comes to housing, when it comes to homelessness. There's so much that this community can be proud of, and there's so much more work to do. By no means am I suggesting that we're done. But when we look at the rest of the state struggling with, for instance, homelessness, which is very closely associated with housing and housing costs, You know, for every year over the last decade almost, we have a number of people experiencing homelessness increasing at double-digit percentages. And then last year, you know, we were able to reduce this community by working together with more services, more regulation, more housing, more shelters. We were able to reduce homelessness for the first time in a decade by 5%, which is extraordinary and a signal that we have a lot more work to do, but a really good start. So I think housing and homelessness remain, you know, the existential challenges of Central Oregon and our state.
Okay. And then, do you want me to repeat the question, or?
Well, that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
No, I totally agree. Housing is basic. It's the root of most all of our issues. It creates inflationary pressure on every industry, on every from child care to health care to education. We're trying to recruit the best and the brightest to our area, and we have become the economic engine of Oregon, really. And when we can't house our people, and when we can't find good options for people to live, they want to be here. We see it in education all the time. Every time we go to recruit a new amazing person, they go, man, I'd love to be, if I could be anywhere, I'd be in Central Oregon, but I can't afford to live here. I've been looking for 2 months. Trust me, you've been on the radar. I was going to come after you and ask if you had a spot for me, and we just don't have it. We're making gains, but the growth here has been so fast and so intense. In my lifetime, it's gone from 19,000 people to where we are now. So infrastructure, all those things are trying to catch up, and we're just bursting at the seams. So there was an interesting article that came out, I believe it was in Politico a couple weeks ago, that was talking about how red states are able to actually build affordable housing in apartment complexes and, at a rate of 5 times faster than blue states, and it came down to regulation. All these things have to be in balance. We need regulation. We absolutely have to have housing codes, but at a time where it's an emergency status for housing, we have to deregulate the things that can be deregulated and revisit them and say what's working, what's not. A lot of our zoning is from the 70s and is heavily influenced by agriculture use, which is amazing, and we need to make sure that that is still protected. But there's areas that we can expand on, and certain regulations that I think we can dial back and at least cut through some of the red tape to make sure we at least have an express line to where we check all the boxes that need to be checked, but we also open up and give a green light to the housing that we need.
Our next question is about housing and homelessness, and it's going to start with you, so I'm just going to use it as sort of like a follow-up. In terms of deregulation and zoning, are you talking about like changing EFU lands into something else? Do you have specifics around your ideas around deregulation?
Yeah, I actually have a perfect example of this. So I live on just under an acre in the heart of Broadman, and for the last 3.5 years I've been trying to get an ADU approval from my mother-in-law, who's just retired as a alternative ed teacher in Eugene. Trying to get her, like, ADU, this is the thing we're all championing for, get some more density. I have plenty of space on my property to put up another place. It's taken me 3.5 years to get that approval. I had to hire an attorney, $20,000 to get them to do what they said they were gonna do and what I should lawfully be able to do. And I just got the permit fees back, and it was $34,000. But there was a reduction of $10,000 because of the House bill that got passed to make us able to build ADUs. So it was only $24,000. And I went, that's the price of a house in the 70s, the entire house. And I understand we need to fund different things, but STCs and the electrical fees that just increased. All of these things are line items on a house, efficiency standard scores. Every one of those things adds hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of dollars onto the price of a house. I was thrilled to get a house under $200,000 in 2004 in Bend, me and my wife, and it was a stretch for us at the time. That was like beyond where we wanted to be. But it was like, if we don't get in now, we'll never be in. That was 2004. I have 4 daughters. I have no idea where they're going to be able to live. So I want to make sure that we actually remove some of those line items that might be wonderful. Like, I'm all for efficient houses. I'm all for upgrades and things. We took a house in the 50s and we upgraded the windows. We added insulation. That was an option that we had. But when all of those are on baseline housing, all those efficiency standards, you could have added $100,000 to that house. And so it went from, now it's $600,000 for an entry-level house. Those are just practical things, all of which are tied and rooted to positive environmental efficiencies. All those are good things, but I want the option to be able to like increase those as I can afford it. Maybe buy into a house that isn't as efficient as it could be, but I can do those as I can, and that's what we did for the next 10 years, is upgrade the house as we could. So I think those are just some practical things that we could do to bring the baseline price of a house down.
The question was that we really had around this was around housing affordability, addressing homelessness. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, just because that was our original question.
I'm sorry, yeah.
So I kind of took you off on a place, so you don't have to apologize for anything. But
yeah, there are some amazing nonprofits in town that are helping catch those people that are in between when rental prices are the same as house prices, mortgages. There are amazing working families at the Bethlehem Inn. They're fully employed. They're not who you're thinking of when you think of homeless, but they'll find themselves in a homeless situation, living in their cars, living in their vans, places, having to move their cars I mean, it's a very sad place to have to be, and it's because they're trying to make it in Central Oregon. They're trying to be here as a teacher, as a nurse, as all these, like my employees that put in the floors with me, they have to be able to live somewhere, and their price of housing goes up, or they find themselves in a spot where all of a sudden they're losing their rental, and now they're like, where do I live? They could easily find themselves in that place and end up at Bethlehem Inn, or end up in the Shepherd's House, or end up in one of these nonprofits, because the affordability just isn't there. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're there's just a lot of things tied to at least a portion of the homeless population that we have. There's plenty of other segments. It's not a homogeneous group. But that to me is probably the easiest tie-in with affordable housing. Other segments of homelessness aren't necessarily attached to that.
yeah. Go over to Anthony. How do you plan to address housing and homelessness issues if you should be in the legislature?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that I think we both agree that House Bill 2001, which would resolve, if it had been implemented when it needed to be implemented for you and your family, would have resolved that issue. Bend was the first city to implement the changes in House Bill 2001, which legalized all types of housing in all types of zoning areas. And you wouldn't have encountered those legal fees and those impediments to wanting to, lean in on the housing crisis and build an ADU if you had been in a jurisdiction that had quickly adopted those. So, in the city of Bend, and what we need to continue to champion across the state is legalizing all types of housing in all types of areas. We've reduced system development charges for homes for working families. We've, in partnership with a chamber, provided model plans for ADUs. We've reduced the costs of building an ADU in the city of Bend. That is an ongoing process along the continuum of utility costs and planning and business building and engineering. But reducing costs for the types of housing that really meet that acute need for working families. It's not just ADUs, it's housing of all types, homes for everybody. That has to be our North Star across the political spectrum. So I'm glad to hear that Michael is in favor of legalizing housing in all areas. And again, had he been in a jurisdiction that had implemented House Bill 2001 as quickly as we did at the City of Bend, then I don't think he would have encountered some of those problems. I would point back again to House Bill 3318, which I helped pass and write. That has to be something that we expand on, which is when we are building and expanding our urban growth boundary, we are focusing on the people who need housing the most, the folks who make our cities, our counties, our communities run. Teachers, nurses, police officers, firefighters. House Bill 1537, which the city just embarked upon, it's a one-time UGB expansion, has that affordability built into it. And when we are being proactive about ensuring that new land, new housing opportunities focus on the areas of our community that need it the most, that's when we're seeing our communities make the most progress. It takes multiple types of approaches. It's not a one-size-fits-all for every city, every community. but the types of legislation that we've worked on locally, I think have been massively successful. I'm also really pleased to hear that we agree that homelessness is a housing problem. For so many people, we hear that this is associated with things like drug abuse or in-migration and other causes, and I think that's a way that communities, other people who are struggling and working to make ends meet. I see countless times for the 200 kids tonight in Redmond Public Schools who are experiencing homelessness, that is often associated with the high cost of housing. Our fast growth here has created more homelessness, and we need to meet that head on, and we need to focus on childhood homelessness, veteran homelessness, and preventing people who are right on the edge of housing insecurity from slipping into homelessness. It becomes much more difficult to own a home or rent a home if you've experienced homelessness for any extended period of time. So the work we've done with rental assistance and again, communities for working families where you can actually have a starter home, or you can actually rent and afford to live in Bend and work here. That's what our focus needs to be in Redmond and Sisters and Tumalo and Bend.
All right.
Well, Jen, I know you wrote the next question on the schools. If you want to go ahead and do that one, and I can do the next one.
Okay, sure. So let's see, we'll start with Anthony. Schools are struggling with declining enrollment numbers, chronic absenteeism, and Oregon's are ranking among the worst in the nation. So how would you address the issue of funding and measure success for schools in your district?
Yeah, I mean, the most important job we do in the legislature is to set our kids on an early path to success. As a dad of 3 daughters in public schools, as the husband of a pediatrician, so many things, so many early social determinants of success and health in this community start in school. And we've had great funding packages in the last couple of cycles, but we can invest more and hold our schools to higher standards in terms of instructional days, good policies like getting tech at use at a reasonable level in our schools, making sure that schools are not just the hub for education, but the hub for services and communities that our cities and counties need. We've had, I think a lot of success, not to repeat the word success, with the Student Success Act, and I'm disappointed that my opponent wants to cut the funding for the Student Success Act. I think we need to let the Student Success Act move forward and continue to invest in the specific tools that we know encourage early childhood literacy. Keeping kids in schools, the number one way that we keep kids in schools is to make sure that the education is tailored to their success. Continuing technical education, vocational education, making sure that our schools are in good working order. And also, for communities where we do see chronic absenteeism, in communities where I work as an attorney for federally recognized Indian tribes, what works really well are attendance coaches, and making sure that we have specific family targeted attendance assistance for kids who are struggling to get to school. I think we're going to be dealing with the COVID impacts on education for some time. I see it in my 3 daughters. I see it in their colleagues at school. I see it in my mom and my sister who are public school teachers. We are going to continue to really struggle to tailor the next generation of education to the kids who had a significant disruption, and that has to be important work in the legislature. The one thing we can't do is stop funding the Student Success Act and the Student Improvement Program.
And do you want me to repeat the question? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
So schools are struggling with declining enrollment numbers, chronic absenteeism, and ranking among the worst in the nation here in Oregon. How would you address the issue of funding and measure success for schools in the district you're elected?
Yeah, so we're at a really interesting time for education. And the declining enrollment thing is, there's a lot of different facets to that. One, especially during COVID, that was really kind of on full blast because people didn't know what to do. People, if there's one thing people care about, it's the education of their children. And so they saw their kids sliding in many different ways, and so not all of them came back. We're seeing some of them return, actually, and a lot of people went to alternative methods like homeschooling, charter schools, different online programs. So the question I get all the time is, why do you need more funding when there's less students? Because doesn't that just mean more per student? And the answer, and it's a valid, I get that. I understand why people would ask that. The answer is, schools are now the mental hospital, the mental health providers now for some of these students. They're taking on making sure they're fed. They're taking on, there's a million different things that schools are doing now that they never had to do. And were never really an issue that we're now having to do and try to do well, but not necessarily with additional funding. They say, we need you to do this, 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 and this. And then we say, awesome, we're in. How do we pay for that? And we're like, next question. And so it's a real pressing issue. And one of the reasons for declining enrollment also is people just aren't having kids at the rate that they were before, especially in Oregon. We're below the replacement value. So we're having schools that have to look at, do we close? Because we're fully staffing a school for a declining number of children. Is this the best use of our funds? There's a lot of different things, efficiencies that look good on paper and can be devastating to a community when they're like, but this is our family school. What do we do with that? And so we're forced to try and find efficiencies, but our ask and what we're actually being asked to do is expanding all the time. And teachers are being asked to do things that they're like, I don't get paid enough to do this. Especially in our special ed is really feeling the pinch right now. That's a difficult job. I come from an autism specialist background, so I worked with young children 2.5 to 5 with autism. And your job is getting bit, is getting punched, getting headbutted, and not reacting. And that is the most difficult job I've ever done. Like, I grew up in construction, throwing down floors for 8 hours a day and going home exhausted and tired. I would do 3 hours of a session with a 2.5-year-old and come home and feel like I worked for 6 weeks straight and was sweaty, and like it's a very difficult job. And we're seeing an increase in that. We're seeing an increase in that population. And so when you have a child, your typical child in a school will cost $13,000 to $15,000 to fund. But then you have a special case where you'll just have a very high needs child that we will service them. We will take care of them. We'll make sure they're loved and taken care of. They require 2 to 3 individuals to take care of them in their own classroom. That child is in the $100,000 category. What do we do with that? So I want to make sure that if schools are being asked to do these things, that they're funded to do it. And so there are some, I think it's a balance of efficiency and funding structure too. If sometimes we will just have to consolidate a school, I think, in the near future, because we can't run multiple different facilities when really we can service them better and focus all the funding in a specific school. It's very delicate. No one likes that. And so finding that balance that speaks to the needs of the community, but also utilizes the funds in a way that makes sense. We were able to gap some of these things because of COVID funding, like ESSER funds is what they're referred to. We tried to use those and really invest in our school district with those money in ways that would give us some landing, some space in the future. But educational funding is a very difficult piece of the Oregon budget that needs to be fully funded. And that is something every year we look and we go, how much are we going to get for this biennium? And it's to watch them say, okay, here's all these amazing programs that we have that we'd love to do, and then go, oh, here's where we have to do, and this goes, and this goes, and this goes. And another piece of that is Oregon is pretty inconsistent on getting any momentum in a direction. You'll get a little ways, and you'll get some momentum and some funding behind. Thankfully, right now it's early childhood literacy, which is wonderful, which is what we need. I don't know if they're going to get distracted in the next year or two by another shiny object, and then the momentum stops, and then we have to turn the ship, and we have to go after this thing. So consistency about the main thing which is educating and making sure our kids can read, can do math, are engaged in music and all the things that make you want to show up and get your attendance rates up, those are the first things that usually get cut, which is a shame. Sporting, music, different things like that.
Did you want to respond to his assertion about the Student Success Act?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where that's coming from. I haven't made any public statements about that or haven't gone out after that in any public way. I think there is a balance there that has to be taken into consideration. I'm 1 foot in education, 1 foot in the business world. And so it's very easy to just say, business, you pay for it. And that continues to be the answer in the Measure 118 that's coming out, is essentially another business, you pay for it. We have to be competitive as a state. And so if a business goes, hey, I work, for instance, a grocery store is on 1 to 2% margins, and they go, I do more than this amount of money in business, but that doesn't mean I have that in profits. They go, I can't compete, and they move to Idaho, or they move to Washington, or they move to other places. So there's that Laffer curve in economics where all of a sudden the economics of staying in business in Oregon don't pencil out anymore. And they say it's not because we're greedy, it's not because we're the evil corporations, and there's corporations out there that need to be taken to task. But there's a practical point where you can't keep adding it to business. So it's not that I don't think we can get some funding from that, but it can't all come from that. It has to come from other areas. It has to come from, we have a tax structure in Oregon that is different because we don't have a sales tax. So there's 3 legs normally to a potential revenue streams, and we don't have one of those in Oregon. So it has to come from somewhere. I get that. But it can't always just come from business. We need to get creative. We need to maybe deprioritize some things that maybe if everything was working really well in education and we were at like 50 of 50 in education, awesome. Let's talk about some of these projects that are well intended, that need some attention maybe. But when we're failing at the main thing, and our priority is on some other things that maybe are peripheral, I think we need to refocus and make sure that the funding we do have is prioritized on the main thing.
Great. The next question is sort
Do
of
I
on.
need to respond?
Well,
You're
okay,
welcome.
so it sounds like
I'm sorry.
you don't support Measure 118. What about you, Anthony?
I don't support
Okay.
Measure 118, yes.
Just be clear.
But
Do I get any time?
No, because you prompted that, and we'd love to just get to more questions.
That makes sense.
If you have any follow-ups, I guess you can respond there too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's stay on the time
Let's stay
frame.
on topic.
I ran a little long on that, sorry.
Oh, it's fine. No, we expect it.
So, the topic of bipartisanship has, kind of been sparked by the legislative walkouts, So I'm curious, do you believe in bipartisan cooperation is important in this role, and how do you plan to work with colleagues from both parties to advance legislation? And I believe Michael?
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm willing to do this is because I think bipartisanship is needed and possible. I think people are pretty disgusted with politics, and for good reason, because it's exhausting. It is frustrating, and it's really put us at our neighbors' necks in a way that we've never seen before. And so when I decided to get involved in politics on the school board level, that contentious attitude was everywhere, and I went, oh, like I said, somebody has to do something about this. I have always been friends in all the parties, and it's hard to get on my enemies list, and because I just genuinely love people, and I'm fascinated by their point of view. And so being able to get onto the school board, and like I said, my school board is very diverse, and one of my closest school board members is as politically different from me as you could possibly get, and I love her. She's amazing. She, sometimes I can go to her and say, what am I missing on this? Because I don't get it. And she'll be like, well, that's not how I think about this at all. I'm like, oh. And she'll explain her position. Like, what a relief. You're not stupid. You're not evil. You're a wonderful, thoughtful person that has a different perspective than me. Great news. I can work with that. And it also helps me find weak points in areas where I'm going, oh gosh, I had that so wrong. Mm-hmm. And I was able to find that out before it was public. Before I died on that hill, I realized, oh man, I totally missed the mark on that one. That's great news, because people are in a camp of, if someone disagrees with me, they are stupid and evil, just automatically right out of the gate. And because of that, they might not acknowledge it at that level, but
we
they think,
encounter it a lot.
how could I possibly be wrong?
Yeah.
And so when I was asked to run for this position by the current senator, I said, here's a few things that I got to get out here. If you want me to come in and be hyper partisan and throw punches and burn, you know, institutions down and do all this stuff, I am not your guy. I would be horrible at it. No one would believe it. And I just have better things to do. I have a great life. I live in Central Oregon. I play music. I run a successful business, and everything I do is positive, and it brings people joy, and brings people together. Why would I? If that's what you need, I am out. And thankfully, that was like, nope, you'd be bad at that. Awesome. And so the only reason I'm running for this right now is because I thought if I can do this on a school board that is diverse as ours, and still have joy and peace and something that brings a community wholeness, like, I'm in. If I can do that on a state level, I'm your guy. I would love to do that because I just don't have enemies. I just don't make them. I might now, sorry, kind of the sad nature of where we're at, but if I can bring the community together and fight for that, like, that's what I was born to do.
Great. Anthony, do you want to repeat the question?
No, I think this race is a referendum on the walkouts and extremism creeping into our political system, which has real life consequences. These walkouts have been over abortion and guns and culture wars, and Central Oregonians are tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of all of the great work we're doing in this community on housing, on homelessness, on education, on wildfire resilience, being stymied by these extremist walkouts. And for the record, I'm committing right now, I will never walk out. I don't care if it's a Democrat walkout or a Republican walkout. They were wrong when they were Democrat walkouts. They were wrong when Tim Knopp led extremist far-right walkouts to shut down our state democracy over a woman's right to access abortion. And let's be really clear, that's what it was about. That's what it will continue to be about every time the Republicans bring, the far-right Republicans, not the middle, bring efforts aimed at limiting a woman's right to choose to the floor in Salem. And that will continue to happen. My dad's Republican, my mom's a Democrat. She was a public school teacher. My dinner table was lively and civil. And that's like my metaphor for Central Oregon. We don't have a lot of time or energy for partisanship. I think that's why I have the endorsement of former Republican gubernatorial candidate Newt Buehler. I think Republicans like Newt Buehler and former Senator Neil Bryant, former Senator Betsy Johnson, who has supported me, I think we're all sick of the extremism that has crept into our process. And look, I appreciate that you want to be a bridge builder, but the policy has to also match the talk. We can't just say, I'm a bridge builder, I want to bring people together, and then take the position that you want to allow employers to discriminate against lesbian and gay people. We can't just say that we're going to be bridge builders and take a position that women can't access an abortion. We can't just say we want to be bridge builders and then fly 1,100 miles away to go protest at the Mexico-Arizona border. So the words have to match the action, and I think this community is definitely, and the state is definitely done with walkouts, and I hope we never ever see another one, because it had practical effects. It held back our ability to fund law enforcement. It held back our ability to do the work we needed to do on homelessness. I was advocating as a member of the local Public Safety Coordinating Council to recalibrate Measure 110. As soon as I joined the LPSCC, I advocated, we have to fix this, it's not working. My partners in law enforcement are telling me they do not have the tools to keep our community safe and just. Let's fix it. We can't, because Tim Knopp won't show up to work in Salem. And as long as we allow far extreme elements to control the legislative process by not showing up, we're going to keep having this problem. So, I just want to reiterate that I think it's disqualifying not to commit to not walking out, even if your party demands it of you. And that's been a really important part of my work and my cross-nomination by the Independent Party of Oregon. I don't think they would have endorsed me and nominated me in this race had I not committed to never walking out. And it's, I feel an ethical obligation to make that clear to the people of Oregon.
Michael, do you want to clarify anything around walkouts? Do you see yourself in any instance, participating in a walkout?
So I think the issue really is the fact that for a long time, half of Oregonians, or close to it, have just felt totally unrepresented. And so he's litigating against Tim Knoop, which I'm not. And so that's a past issue. That is something that if Tim was still in the race, you'd have some valid points there.
But that's why I want to ask you what you would do, not what Tim did.
Yeah, so I never walk out for policy issues like that. I'm committed to staying engaged and really making sure that we are actually at the table balancing out some of those policies. And I think that was a place of kind of desperation because of a supermajority. That was the only lever they had to pull. I'm not in that position and won't be, because I'll be in there. And so I'll be able to balance that out and actually make sure that we have some voices at the table. But anytime you have that situation where somebody leaves the table, it's a divorce situation, essentially, for the state. And I'm here to make sure that we are rounding out the conversation and we actually have a voice. What I've noticed is in our school board, somebody will be really upset with me, and they'll reach out and say, "Hey, you don't represent me." And the response sometimes is, on this, I am on the opposite side of how you feel, but she's doing an amazing job representing your position. And like we're bargaining over that. And she's doing a good job making sure that your voice is heard. That's my job as a legislator to know. But this is a purple district. I'm not there to just represent Republicans.
Right,
I have my point of view.
So is it a no? You know you wouldn't walk out?
Not over policy issues, for sure.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like a really 100%.
So another clarification too, they were actually walking out because the Democrats weren't following the Oregon State Constitution of reading bills prior to their being voted on. So
But that was one time. That was one of the times, right?
Honestly, also, this wasn't my fight. This is something I'm engaging in now.
Yeah.
But you're saying, is he going to walk out because he doesn't like abortion? Is he going to walk out because he doesn't do this,
Yeah.
or all these different things? And I answered that question.
Okay, fair enough.
Next question is on drug deflection. I'll start with you, Michael. What do you see the legislature's role being now that Oregon has largely repealed Measure 110 and introduced a drug deflection program instead? Since this came out of the legislature, what oversight now should the legislature have?
That the actual deflection centers have all the funding that they need. That was always the promise. We've seen those kinds of things. Okay, if we're going to make sure that it's legal to have marijuana, well, we're going to utilize these funds to make sure that that fund goes to here and all those different things. We need to make sure those deflection centers actually are fully funded, and they're obviously that takes a little time to roll out. This is a new thing, and I understand the deflection program is just getting going here in Central Oregon. So we'll see how effective that is. I hope it's utilized. I hope it's actually used and is effective in getting people out of getting them the treatment that they need. Until we see how that goes, like right now, it sounds like a good idea that will hopefully flesh out that way, but the funding absolutely has to go there, and that's my only worry, is that it won't be funded in the way that it should be. I know I've had family members, I've had employees, I have people that have struggled with those with drug addiction, and I don't want to see them in prison if deflection works, and if there are actual treatment programs that will get them out of that cycle and get them back into employment, get them back into society in a way where they feel positive about themselves and are able to recontribute. That's a dark place to be. And one of the things that we've done over the years, actually our family business was started in the 50s as a way that my grandfather could pay for himself to be a pastor and to run their food bank. So him and my grandma ran a food bank that's still in place even though they're gone. Taking care of people and making sure they're in that spot where they can get out of their whatever cycle they're in. People are born into some really devastating situations, and sometimes the drugs are the only positive thing in their life, which is tragic. And so they'll never get out of that cycle if it's not broken. So that's what my family's been doing a long time before me, is loving the people that are hard to love, and the ones that hurt you and hurt you and hurt you because they're stuck in that cycle of addiction. So I hope and pray that deflection is a really viable option that does what we want it to do and keeps people out of prisons and breaks that cycle.
Okay. Anthony, a repeat question?
You know, as a dad, as a tribal court judge who hears a lot of criminal cases, we have so much more work to do, and deflection is just a really tiny part of it. It's been a real honor to serve with our partners in law enforcement on the local Public Safety Coordinating Council, which is the Deschutes County entity that's managing and helping, you know, work with the Sheriff's Office on creating a deflection program that actually works, because we're not going to arrest our way out of this drug crisis. I think we know that, but law enforcement has to have the tools to keep our communities safe and just. I would say it's not just funding. Obviously funding is part of it. We've massively underfunded public defenders, criminal justice system, drug treatment, mental health, and we need to catch up on all of that. But it also, we would be naive to think that we're done with the policy work on deflection. And I think that this is going to continue to need to be calibrated to work. I'm not willing to experiment like we did as a state with Measure 110. I opposed it. I opposed it because of my experience working with federally recognized Indian tribes, working to ensure that reservations are safe. You know, often we see law enforcement vacuums on reservations, and what happens is that vulnerable people, women, moms, children, disabled people, bear the brunt of the lack of law enforcement. And it's been my entire career's work to make sure that, you know, the communities that I serve are safe, and that we're looking first to making sure that children and vulnerable community members are being served best by the governments who serve them. So it's both funding and policy work, and I think the legislature probably needs to play a closer role than they have in the past on these issues.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry. This next question is about transportation, and we'll start with you, Anthony. As the state looks to overhaul how transportation is funded, what do you see as priorities on the roads for people in the district, and how would you propose changing the funding structure, if at all, to address ODOT's multi-billion-dollar budget shortfall?
Yeah, spent the day yesterday with the Joint Committee on Transportation, which was great to have legislative leadership in town to look at Central Oregon, because what we've done here in a lot of ways is a huge success. But what I heard from everybody, Crook County, Jefferson County, commissioners throughout Central and Southern Central Oregon, the priority is safety. And that means something different in every community, but we are not going to have safe roads if we don't maintain them. We are not going to have safe roads if we do not recalibrate the ODOT revenue structure. We have a 2 to 3 leg stool right now on transportation funding. We need to look at a 8-leg table so that people are paying their fair share. EV users, heavy road users are paying their fair share, and that we're building the kind of climate-friendly, safe traffic infrastructure both inside of cities and outside of cities throughout Oregon. DMV needs to be much closer to self-funded rather than pulling from other areas of our state budget. And I think we need to be geographically equitable. We're going to invest as a state massively on the west side of our state. We do not have an Abernathy Bridge and an I-5 bridge in Central Oregon. And if as a state we're going to invest in the types of projects on the west side of the state that are needed in order to continue to economically develop and open housing and move freight and commerce, we also need to be represented here. And we need to have the investments here because we are the fastest growing community in the state, and in some ways one of the fastest growing communities in the country. Our transportation investment infrastructure needs to reflect that fact, and we need to keep an eye towards ensuring that we are using our transportation dollars wisely to open up housing, to make sure that our inside our cities and outside of our cities are we're developing the kind of housing we need for working families in Central Oregon.
Anthony, can I ask a follow-up on that? If you're proposing an 8-leg table to get off this 2-leg stool, what do those legs look like? Are they additional
Yes, right.
fees, structures?
Yeah, I mean, right now, and I would say overall, I would like to see each of those legs be lower cost. We don't have fees right now at the DMV that pay for the cost of what you're doing. A license plate is more expensive to make than what you pay for it. We don't, EV users are not paying their fair share on the road. There needs to be a recalibration of potentially road user fees if that's something that comes before the legislature. There's a menu of options, and some of them can be, pretty modest.
Right.
But on the scale that we're talking about across the state, they could significantly improve our transportation and climate future. I'm actually really encouraged by the bipartisanship that I've seen. It's going to get much tougher next year when we start having these conversations. But yesterday on the committee, I mean, when you have that many members of the Legislative Joint Transportation Committee agreeing that safety is the #1 priority and that we need to expand and diversify the revenue streams, the devil will be in the details. It will be very challenging politically, but I'm optimistic.
And so, same question to you, Michael, too.
Yeah, and this is something we are on the same page on. I've talked to a lot of different organizations. I talked to the Trucking Association a couple weeks ago, and when Anthony brings up the equitable paying for the structures, the 8-legged stool, the trucking industry overpaid when they finally did an audit to the tune of $1 billion, what they were actually supposed to be responsible for, and they don't get that back. What that ended up doing is we have to increase our freight costs, and we had surcharges for fuel, and we have a lot of things that are shipped to our company, wood products primarily, and surcharges went through the roof, freight went through the roof, and they're really going, hey, this isn't fair to us. Like we admit we are harder on the roads than an EV. We are harder. We're big. These are big trucks, and so it's not that they are unwilling to pay, but the brunt of it is being, or at least a huge outsized portion is being paid by them, and because of that, there's inflation there. Just one little piece. So the EVs being able to pay, that's a tricky one because nobody wants to be tracked on mileage, right? These are all, people start getting privacy invasions, like you're tracking where I'm going. Like there's a lot of sticky things of because it's not on gas. So finding smart ways that it might take a little work to get people to go, okay, I see what you're doing. Here's how you track mileage on an EV. But to make sure, because we are one of the top states for electric vehicles, which is awesome. But we need to make sure that they're paying and helping to upkeep the roads that they have there too as well. So also, exactly right, making sure that the east side of Oregon doesn't feel left out, because there's lots of mileage out there that is not even close to an urban center. So making sure that they're not left out and making sure that they have what they need to take care of their roads. The safety piece, obviously, huge priority. And I'm also just very glad to see the bipartisanship on this. Obviously, everyone recognizes that it's broken and that we're going to have to get creative, and it's going to be quite a negotiation. But that's what it's supposed to be. That's what it's supposed to be, is everybody bringing in their concerns and saying, hey, I get it, but you're missing this part of the equation. And hopefully that lands in a really solid place where we actually have the fees dropped, spread out over a broader group of people, and we actually have what we need to have the best roads in the United States. Because we don't have the federal dollars like in the 50s. A lot of that stuff, a lot of the infrastructure, there's a huge push. And so a lot of that stuff came federally, which was awesome, and that gave us a huge jump. That hasn't been the case for a long time. So now it's, how do we do this on our own now, and with meaning a lot fewer federal dollars.
All right. Just a little time check. We have about 10 minutes before Aaron needs to leave. But we're getting close. So I think we're starting with Michael on this one. Just thinking about water rights and usage in light of ongoing drought and expected population growth. What are your thoughts on how to manage all of those competing priorities?
Yeah, this is one of those that is not on everybody's radar, but I'm trying to remember the quote, water's for fighting and whiskey's for drinking. It is a very contentious issue because it's super important. Everything comes from our ability to be able to water our crops, but also have what we need in cities. So I got to be a part of the, I'm not good with acronyms, even though I'm right in the middle of education, which is the world of acronyms. But there was a joint session in between the Bend and Redmond and Sisters and all the neighboring communities about water in Redmond a couple months ago. And it was fascinating to watch the people around the table say, whew, there's a lot of the same people around the table, and 20 years ago it was all about keeping the water in the rivers. And when we did that, which is awesome, wells started drying up because we weren't, you weren't having seepage from canals to replenish wells. So wells that were at 300 feet are now at 600 feet, and they're drying up. So there's a lot of different people at the table going, but what about me? What about me? This is how I feed my family by watering our crops. But then there's the conservation effort. Well, if we don't have it in the river, that's a problem. And so setting it up in a way, we're probably going to have to get into a metered situation with people that irrigate, which they will hate that idea because a lot of the time they'll have free, you pump as much as you want. Well, that's coming from somewhere, and if it's not replenishing our aquifers, if it's draining from the rivers, well, that's a problem. So there are so many different entities at cities making sure they have the water and that they are actually conserving the amount of water that they're using to, we talk about it all the time in the school district because we are the #1 user of water because of sporting fields and because of our facilities. There's grass everywhere, and it used to be just a practical thing because it kept out the weeds. Well, now water's a real issue, and we are using a ton of it. So we're looking at how do we conserve water as a district, and we're transitioning to turf fields, for instance, and over time. We'd love to do it now, but we'd love to be not the #1 user of water in Redmond. So we're looking at xeriscaping, we're looking at all these different options. And Redmond's actually leading the charge from the Redmond City Council from water conservation. And how are we using the water that we have? And because we're growing at incredible rates as well, how do we do that sustainably and have what we need in the future? And so they're starting to look at water conservation as the #2 water user in Redmond, going, what are we doing? How are we using it? How do we plan for the future? Super complicated issue. I'm by no means the expert in it. What I've noticed in school board is as I've been there, I ask the right questions and I dig under the surface and really try to figure out what's actually going on there so I can make informed decisions as opposed to me coming in with my half-baked ideas and saying, do this. So I look forward to learning a lot more about this and digging in, and I'm having lots of interesting conversations.
As an attorney for tribes, I've been taught by my clients that water is life, and it is, especially here, one of the most sacred resources we have. I'll say what I said when I testified before the Oregon Water Resources Division when they were in town to hear testimony on the new groundwater rules. Bend and Central Oregon are an example for the rest of the state on collaboration. Farmers, environmentalists, advocates for fish and water. We have a collaborative approach that has worked. If you looked, downstream of Bend on the Deschutes River 20 years ago, there was no water. And we've restored so much of our in-stream water flow with conservation and mitigation efforts that came from Central Oregon. The kinds of collaborative policies that we need to make when it comes to water resources, we need to shift and lean in harder on data so that we know where our water is going, and making sure that we are collaborating on conservation. Our water use in the basin right now, municipally, for the Deschutes Basin is 1.8% for municipal use. That's extraordinary. It's been relatively flat in Bend because of our conservation and mitigation efforts. That should be the gold standard. If we can do it here and grow as quickly as this community has and still have relatively flat per capita water use, we're doing something right, and we need to continue to do that. I would also say that the conservation efforts of the irrigation districts and the Deschutes River Water Conservancy, everybody working together to conserve through piping, lining, and other mitigation and conservation efforts need to be the gold standard. let's reverse engineer from where we are in Central Oregon, which is a successful place. We can do better, and use that as a model for the rest of the state. And you know, the more fish and water that we have in the river, I think the better for all of us, and the better for our partners in tribal governments. And I'm really proud of the work that Central Oregon has done.
Just really quick, you said something about metering for irrigators. You talked about the 1.8% urban use. So that's like, okay, there's a lot out there. Any thoughts about metering wells? Because that's a big piece of water use. We don't know how much is being used. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that.
I think there's an opportunity to work with irrigation districts and exempt well owners, owners of land with exempt wells on them, to look at, you know, whether there's an incentive program to mitigate based on those exempt wells. But what I know is that we can't just keep moving forward not knowing how much water is coming out of exempt wells.
Right.
At the meeting that we were at that Michael's referring to, which was the COCA meeting, the Central Oregon Cities Association.
There it is.
Water, you know, what we heard from water users throughout the region was, I'm willing to help share information if it protects my water resource, because I got to grow crops. I gotta, you know, feed my family. But that framework isn't there, and until we have, you know, good information about what's happening in exempt wells, we're going to be operating in the dark. I would say that I recall that the percentage that day was roughly 20% of that water we think is coming from, you know, areas of water resources that we just don't measure. Mm-hmm. And we've seen roughly 10% improvement by piping and lining. So we can make a huge impact. We have to also be cognizant of the fact that we're probably seeing somewhere between a 10 and 20% decline in groundwater levels because of climate. And that's a reality that we need to act on quickly.
Michael, any thoughts?
Not to add to that.
Okay, well, great. Well, it looks like you're going to end,
Yeah,
so you're going to step
Thanks,
out.
Sorry, Aaron.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Should we finish off?
Yeah, let's finish. Let's finish.
So we'll start with you, Anthony. What sets you apart from your opponent?
Yeah, I'm not an extremist. I've been a pragmatic city councilor, somebody who has worked with people from across the political spectrum to get things done. And you know, I think our community is really tired of culture wars, and I think ready to move past it. And you know, I also think my opponent's in a tough spot. If you look at the top of his ticket, we have a convicted felon. We have somebody who hasn't shown any ethics or values, and you know, I do think that it's tough right now to be somebody who's running in a party that is headed by you know, a far-right extremist, and that's the reality.
Michael?
Yeah, thankfully I'm not one of those extremists. So I've lived my whole life, and anyone who knows me knows that's the case. As somebody that really wants to build bridges and wants to continue relationship outside of politics. Politics is not the end-all, be-all of a community. It's actually needs to be relegated back to where it used to be boring. And the thing that we didn't talk about, because it was impolite, because we're humans first and neighbors first, and we took care of each other. And we had our thoughts and we had our policy disagreements with. I think the exploitation of politics into being the religion of our society is really a tragedy. So I am in no way that guy that's religion first, friendships and relationship. What did it just say, religion or
Politics
first?
religion.
Let me clarify. No, I'm not a politics first person, and I never have been. I'm a problem solver first. I'm not a partisan. And so to be painted as an extremist is disingenuous, and it doesn't hold any water. And I'm fine. You can say it as many times as you want. It just doesn't hold any water. And so I want to be involved in local politics, not national politics, because those don't have anything to do with me really. I think the big fallacy that we've seen since I was a kid is it was always change the world, change the world, change the world, which is wonderful. But the world for the vast majority of history was the 2 miles around your house that you could actually do something about. So that's what I'm engaged with, and that's what I care about, is the people in my district that are on both sides. It's a purple district, and I kind of love that. I meet people that are from incredibly red districts, And I'm so grateful that's not mine. I wouldn't be doing this if that was my district. But we have the opportunity to have a balanced government. And that to me is so exciting because when people don't feel they're represented, they start getting angry because they feel helpless. And when they feel angry, they start doing things that are scary. And I want no part of that. I want people to have options. I want to disagree well with them. I do it all the time and remain friends. I want to be able to do what we've done on the Redmond School Board, which is argue well and bargain well and show hopefully the rest of whoever's watching the school board meeting, which hopefully you guys have hobbies.
That's my hobby.
Oh, I'm sorry. But to me, that's been the top priority. Yes, we're going to disagree. Let's do it well. Let's show people that it's possible. Let's open up space for people to have a conversation. I almost think of it like we're in World War I trenches, the most frustrating war. We've had lots of frustrating wars, but so frustrating because it was just, you're in your trench, attack, go back to your trench, attack, go back to your trench. And that is just ugly, and it's wrecking our society, and it's making it to where Central Oregon, when I was a kid, didn't feel that way at all. It was, yeah, whatever, we're just pulling together for each other, we're helping each other out. And that is the only reason I'm willing to do this, is because there's hope for me that that can be a possibility. So I want to do it here in Central Oregon, I want to do it in Salem. I want to be another voice at the table that keeps one side from just, and well-intended, like I said, if there's only one side of the conversation, you can have a consensus on a terrible idea. I see it all the time because there's missing information. And so when, just like it's happened to me, a good friend of mine that disagrees with me politically goes, have you ever thought about this? You go, no, I haven't. I've never heard that side of it. That's actually really interesting. It tempers my view, and I've changed my opinion on multiple occasions because I realized I was missing the other side of the conversation. That to me is exciting. That to me brings wholeness, I think, and not to, just be rainbows of just perfect peace and harmony. Like we're never going to agree on all the things, but I want to do it well and show people like it could be this way again. And you see it in their eyes when you say, hey, are you exhausted? Are you just tired of this grossness and want a different way? And people just like, a weight comes off their shoulders, like, oh, wouldn't that be awesome? But it's almost in like fictional categories where it didn't used to be that way. So that's what I want to do. That's my goal. No intention of being an extremist because it's not in me. I'd be a bad one. So I hope that resonates, and I hope, because it resonates with everybody I talk to, and they go, I've always appreciated that about you. So that's what I'm here to do.
Great. Well, we know this time, we always like to thank, both the candidates, saying, we know this is not an easy race. It's intense. You're in a purple district, a lot of things to think about. So we just thank you for taking the time and having a robust discussion today.
Thank you.
That's great.
If it wasn't fun, we wouldn't do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So fun. It's like, does it look like fun?
I don't know. Is this fun?
I think we may have some issues there, but I think it's fun.
Yeah. Okay.
I enjoy it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that this doesn't have to devolve, and that's like a huge goal for me, is to make sure we disagree well and show people that it's possible.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks to you both.
Yeah,
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks.